Police Chief with the City of Red Bluff. I'm here this afternoon because I know that the community and some in the media have concerns about and questions about the officer-involved shooting that occurred early yesterday morning. I'm here to hopefully answer those questions and provide the details that I can as I know them at this time. With that stated, it is very important to recognize that we are still in the very, very early stages of this investigation. And so the information available to me is somewhat limited, and it's based on what we know now and not what we will know when the investigation is concluded. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have and hopefully clarify where we are in this investigation.
Yes, so one of the big questions that we're looking to answer is why was deadly force used when it did not appear as a threat on the video? Why was he shot at? And concerning that he had a stick with four policemen and backup possibly on the way.
Okay, so you've asked a lot there. Let me address essentially what you're saying is the individual who has been identified as Mr. Lane, Henry Lane, 42 of Red Bluff, that he did not pose a threat or a lethal threat with the stick that he had in hand. That's essentially what your question comes back to. Use of force by police officers has to be based on reasonableness. In this situation, our officers used a number of tactics in an attempt to gain control and compliance from him. They started with verbal requests, repeated verbal requests to drop the weapon. Clearly, Mr. Lane unfortunately did not comply. They also used other tactics. They attempted use of a taser. They utilized several rounds from beanbag rounds, each seeking his compliance. Each time he defied. Ultimately, when one of the officers felt that their life or the life of the other officers were in danger in terms of receiving significant injury, a choice was made to utilize deadly force. What we believe at this time is that one round from that officer's service pistol was used, and it did in fact eliminate the threat that was occurring to them at this time, or at that time.
Okay, do you feel, despite the taser and the bean bags, do you still feel it was justified to use deadly force?
Let's remember that the investigation is in the very early stages, so to make a conclusion like that is very, very, very premature. I won't make an absolute conclusion until the investigation is complete and I have all the information to make an appropriate assessment. At this point, though, I have had opportunity to preview some of our body camera footage. I've also seen a video online, and based on those reviews, preliminarily, I do see that use of force and significant use of force appears to have been appropriate.
Yeah, why do you think he was, based on what you've seen, why do you think he was appropriate?
Because I think the use of a stick, which in this case was several feet in length, had some girth to it. I think anyone who is reasonable could conclude that if that weapon were used against an officer or anyone for that matter and was to strike them, particularly in the head, that could result in serious bodily injury to one of our officers. Yeah,
most of the viewers and most of our viewers chiming in said it wasn't appropriate, given it was about like what, a 4-foot stick or something like that. Would you say it was about 4 foot?
I'm not going to say what the length was.
Yeah.
It was several feet.
Yeah.
And it did have some girth to it. So it is my opinion and my belief, based on what I know today, is that very well could have resulted in significant or serious injury to an officer.
Yeah. What do you say to those viewers and people that think that it was not appropriate and for using a stick?
I think it's important to remember that we want to look at every piece of evidence that we can. That's what our investigator, that's what the District Attorney Bureau of Investigation unit is intending and will do. We want to base our conclusion on all the facts, not on one video shot from a distance that doesn't capture the entirety of the event. We want to base our conclusions on the entirety of the evidence that exists.
Okay. Another thing was how long it took to perform CPR. On our viewer video, we timed it out. Could be more, could be less. About 2.5 minutes to perform CPR. Why do you think it took that long?
So, and that's a fair question, and that's something that the investigation, I hope and I'm certain, will reveal. One of the things, though, that comes to my mind is We perform CPR in circumstances where individuals are not breathing. So I don't yet have the answer, but the answer very well may be that he was still breathing up to that point.
Okay.
That's something that we're looking into in the investigation.
Okay. What is the protocol when it comes to giving CPR?
Well, first, as I said, I think anyone who's trained in CPR, you don't give CPR to someone who's still breathing and still has a heartbeat.
Okay. So did they check right away that he was still breathing? Was he breathing up until that point?
Again, I've done a very, very preliminary review of the video, so I'm not drawing any conclusions whatsoever. I'm just posing possible answers to your question.
Okay.
Jake, you have any
Yeah.
questions you want to
Yes.
chime in on?
So moving forward from here on, is there anything that the police department will be doing differently in terms of protocol or in terms of training?
The investigation is far too premature to make any kind of decisions like that. We have no idea. I've not read one report yet, obviously, because they're not done. So it'd be entirely premature to make any kind of conclusions as to whether or not anything we've done or any training that we do needs to be modified in any way.
Speaking of training, did you guys have any knowledge of Mr. Lane's mental illness background?
Well, first of all, I have some knowledge of Mr. Lane and some of his background. I'm not here this afternoon to talk about Mr. Lane's past, his criminal history, or any history that he has. I think if you're interested in that, you'll probably find that most easily through public record. In no way do I want to disparage his name or his memory. That's not why I'm here today.
Would you say your officers have like special training that they underwent on mental related things that they come across?
Sure. Yes. Every officer in our police department has received post-certified critical incident training, CIT for short. That is I believe it's a 32-hour course, if I remember correctly. And so, yes, we've received very specific training in that regard.
Okay. Overall, given everything that you've seen, videos, body cam, do you feel as chief that this was handled well, or do you think it could have been handled differently in any way?
Again, I'm not going to draw any absolute conclusions until I get all the information. That would be premature. I'm not here to speculate. I'm here to keep an open mind. We owe it to our officers. We owe it to our community to make the absolute correct conclusion. And the only way to do that is to base it on all the evidence that exists.
How many officer-involved shootings did you guys have in the past year?
This would be the only one that comes to mind.
Okay, I think, can't remember the name right now, Rusty or something like that? Carl Rusty?
You may be speaking of a Tehama County Sheriff's Department
Okay,
investigation?
okay, that wasn't involved with the Red Bluff Police?
No.
Okay. Would you know any of in the past 5 years?
I don't recall any officer-involved shootings with an individual in the last 5 years.
Okay. So I spoke with a woman who was involved with Lane previously years ago, and she said he was very well known in this community, having mental issues. So how do you think that played a role in how your guys handled this? Do you think, how much of that did they, knowing that he had some sort of a background, how could have they, I guess, handled this differently?
Well, again, I think you're asking me to speculate a little bit because you're asking me to answer questions about what my officers knew or didn't know. I don't have that information right now. That will likely come up during the investigation, and so when I, in the end, am reviewing the reports regarding this, I may very well know that answer. At this time, I have no idea if they knew of Mr. Lane, if they met him before, if they understood his history. I have no idea, and not here to speculate on that.
Okay. Okay. Just in conclusion, to just wrap it up, overall, you think it was justified?
Well, again, you're asking me to draw a conclusion when I don't have all the evidence. What I'm here to tell you this afternoon, though, is the loss of life is significant. And because it's significant, we take that very seriously. That's why we've opened 2 investigations, one internally, where we've assigned our investigations unit sergeant, Bill Williams, to conduct that investigation. We've also immediately interacted with the district attorney's office, and they are completing the external investigation so that we have that side of it as well. We want to get to the right answer. We want to know exactly what occurred. And in the end, our job is to make the right call based on all the evidence.
Yeah. What was that officer's name again
Which officer?
that fired the bullet?
The officer who fired his service pistol is Corporal Stephen Harper. He has about 15 years law enforcement experience, and he's been with the Red Bluff Police Department for about 3.5 years.
Okay. What's his current status right now with the police department?
He's a full-time employee with the police department as a police corporal, as he was the day that this occurred. He is on paid administrative leave, as is standard protocol in these type of incidents.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just again, I'll reiterate that we take this situation very seriously. We don't take it lightly at all. Life was lost here. So with that comes very serious investigations that will look at every piece of evidence that can be found, and in the end, we will draw the conclusion that is correct based on the entirety of that information, and whatever that result is, we will live with the consequences.
Okay.
Jake, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that about covers it.
Okay. Anyone else in the audience? Well, thank you. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate your time. If you have any other questions, feel free to give me a phone call here at the police department, 527-8282. Thank you.